Lyra Nightingale stared at the foreclosure notice, her hands trembling as the rain pounded against the windows of the Victorian house she'd called home for 15 years. $300,000. The sum burned into her retinas like a brand. There must be some mistake, she said, looking up at Sterling Pierce, whose tailored suit remained immaculate despite the Boston downpour outside. No mistake, Miss Nightingale. Pierce adjusted his gold cufflinks. Your adoptive parents took out several high-interest loans before their accident. The banks have been patient, but patience runs out when money is involved. The living room suddenly felt like a mausoleum. Family photos of the Merrills, who had taken her in at 8 years old, smiled from the walls, oblivious to the financial time bomb they'd left behind. I have 3 jobs already. I can't possibly. 3 minimum wage jobs won't make a dent. Pierce's smile didn't reach his eyes. But I have a solution that could solve your problems overnight. Lyra's instincts screamed danger. Sterling Pierce represented wealthy clients throughout New England, but his reputation for ethical flexibility was well known. She'd only contacted him because her parents named him as executor. What kind of solution? She asked. Pierce opened his briefcase and removed a document bound in blue leather. One of my clients requires a wife. Temporarily. Excuse me. Thorne Blackwood. Perhaps you've heard of him? Everyone in Massachusetts knew of Thorne Blackwood. Tech billionaire. Recluse. Genius. His face occasionally graced magazine covers. All sharp angles and cold, calculating eyes. This is insane, Lyra said. Pierce shrugged. Mr. Blackwood needs to improve his image after that unpleasantness with the government contracts. His PR team believes a marriage would soften public perception. You need money. It's a simple transaction. You want me to sell myself? I want you to enter a mutually beneficial arrangement. 1 year of marriage. No physical requirements. Just public appearances and discretion. Pierce slid the contract toward her. Upon completion, you receive $500,000. Lyra's mind raced. Enough to save the house and finish her nursing degree. Why me? You're photogenic, educated, and desperate. Most importantly, you're a complete unknown with no embarrassing social media history. Perfect for a man requiring absolute privacy. Lyra thought of the foreclosure notice, of the Merrills who had saved her from foster homes, of the promises she'd made at their funeral 2 years ago. I need to think about this. You have 24 hours, Pierce said, standing. After that, I'll find someone else. Across the city, in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, Thorne Blackwood hurled his phone against a wall. Absolutely not. He growled at the woman sitting calmly on his white leather couch. Simone Chun, his chief of public relations, didn't flinch. 12 years of managing Thorne's image had made her immune to his outbursts. The Pentagon contract is hanging by a thread, she said. The committee chair has traditional values. Your reputation as a what? Thorne's voice was dangerous. As a cold, calculating bachelor isn't helping. The rumors about Vivian. Don't mention her name. Simone sighed. The Department of Defense doesn't care about your broken engagement. They care about stability. We need to present you as settled, mature. By marrying a stranger? By creating an image that reassures old men with military budgets. Simone stood, straightening her blazer. Sterling Pierce has found a suitable candidate. Clean background, photogenic, no industry connections. Thorne moved to the window. Rain streaked down the glass, distorting the city lights below. The Blackwood Technologies headquarters dominated the skyline, 30 stories of innovation built from nothing. Now the Pentagon contract could double its value overnight, or destroy everything if it fell through. 1 year, Simone pressed. No actual relationship required. Just appearances at key events. She gets financial security, you get the contract. Thorne's jaw tightened. I don't trust Pierce. We vetted his choice independently. Simone retrieved a tablet from her bag and pulled up a profile. Lyra Nightingale, 23, nursing student, orphaned at 8, adopted by the Merrills. They died in a car accident 2 years ago. No close family, no romantic entanglements, just student debt and a house in foreclosure. Thorne studied the image, high cheekbones, serious eyes, nothing like Vivian's calculated perfection. She looks. Thorne paused. Familiar. Something tugged at his memory, a dream perhaps, or a passing encounter. You've never met, Simone assured him. We checked thoroughly. She handed him a pen. The papers need your signature. Thorne took the pen, its weight suddenly unbearable. One signature to secure his company's future. One signature to bind his life to a stranger's. If she causes problems. The contract is airtight, Simone said. Either party breaches, she gets nothing. 3 days later, Lyra stood in a sterile city hall room, wearing a department store dress she couldn't afford. Sterling Pierce and a woman he'd introduced as Simone watched from the corner while a bored civil servant read the marriage vows. Thorne Blackwood was taller than he appeared in photos. His presence filled the room, dark and electric. He hadn't spoken directly to her, communicating through terse nods and cold glances. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said. Thorne turned to her, his expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, uncertainty flashed in his eyes. Then he leaned forward, his lips brushing hers in what was meant to be a perfunctory seal on their business arrangement. The instant their lips touched, electricity surged between them, not metaphorical but actual current, making them both jerk back in shock. Simultaneously, an image flashed through both their minds. 2 children in a sterile laboratory, holding hands as electrodes monitored their brainwaves. Thorne stumbled backward, his normally composed face shattered with confusion. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. Lyra touched her tingling lips, equally shaken. I don't know. "Did you feel?" he started, then stopped himself, eyes narrowing with suspicion. Pierce stepped forward. "Is something wrong?" "No," Thorne snapped. "Everything's fine." He grabbed Lyra's arm. "Let's go." As he pulled her toward the exit, Lyra caught his whispered words, more to himself than to her. "Whatever game you're playing, it won't work." But the identical vision still burned in both their minds, a memory neither of them should have. The sleek black Bentley cut through the rain-slicked streets of Boston. Lyra sat rigid against the leather seat, keeping as much distance as possible from Thorne. Neither had spoken since leaving City Hall. The strange vision from their kiss lingered between them like an uninvited passenger. Thorne's phone buzzed constantly. He ignored it, staring out the window, his profile sharp against the passing city lights. Finally, he broke the silence. "We leave for Newport in an hour." "Newport?" Lyra hadn't expected to leave Boston. "My primary residence." His voice was clipped. "The press release about our marriage goes out tomorrow morning. We need to be established there before the media circus begins." Lyra's stomach tightened. "I need to pack my things." "Already handled. Ms. Chun sent a team to your house. Everything you need will be at the estate." "Strangers went through my belongings?" The violation stung worse than she'd anticipated. Thorne finally looked at her, eyes cold. "You signed away your privacy when you signed the contract." Page 4, paragraph 3. The car pulled up to a private airfield where a sleek helicopter waited, blades already turning. "I hate flying," Lyra said, more to herself than to him. "You'll get used to it." He exited the car without offering assistance. As the helicopter lifted off, Lyra watched Boston shrink beneath them. Somewhere down there was the Victorian house she'd fought to save. Now it seemed like a child's toy, something she'd outgrown without realizing it. The Blackwood estate sprawled across 5 oceanfront acres in Newport, Rhode Island. The main house was modern, glass and stone perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. The helicopter landed on a private pad where a small staff waited in perfect formation. "Welcome home, Mr. Blackwood," said an elegant older woman. "Mrs. Winters, this is Lyra," Thorne said. "My wife." The words sounded foreign in his mouth. Mrs. Winters didn't show surprise. Clearly, she'd been briefed. "Your suite is prepared, Mrs. Blackwood." The title made Lyra flinch. "Would you like refreshments after your journey?" "I need to work," Thorne interjected. "Show her to the East Wing." He strode away without a backward glance, leaving Lyra with the housekeeper. "This way, Mrs. Blackwood." The East Wing was larger than Lyra's entire house. Her suite included a bedroom, sitting room, private bathroom, and a balcony overlooking the ocean. The closets were already filled with clothing she'd never seen, all in her size. "Your personal items are in those boxes." Mrs. Winters indicated several neatly stacked containers. "Dinner is at 7, though Mr. Blackwood often takes meals in his office." After the housekeeper left, Lyra opened the nearest box. Her photos, books, and the small keepsakes from her adoptive parents had been carefully packed. The strangers had even brought the teddy bear she'd had since childhood, its worn fur a reminder of a life that seemed increasingly distant. She tried not to cry. She'd made this choice. $500,000 for 1 year of her life. The math had seemed simple when she signed the contract. Now, standing in a stranger's home, wearing a stranger's ring, she wondered what she'd truly sacrificed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sterling Pierce. Remember your NDA. No communication about the arrangement. Your first payment has been transferred. She checked her bank account. $50,000, the first installment, had appeared. Enough to halt the foreclosure proceedings. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt purchased. Dinner was a solitary affair in the formal dining room. Mrs. Winters informed her that Thorne was working and wouldn't join her. The room seated 20, making her plate of perfectly cooked salmon seem absurd against the massive table. After dinner, restlessness drove her to explore. The house was a maze of minimalist design, expensive but sterile, like a high-end hotel. No family photos, no mementos, nothing personal except for rare art pieces that probably cost more than her education. She found the library by accident, a two-story room with walls of books and a spiral staircase. Unlike the rest of the house, this room felt lived in. Books lay open on tables. A half-empty whiskey glass sat beside a worn leather chair. You shouldn't be in here. Lyra startled. Thorne stood in the doorway, jacket discarded, tie loosened. His voice wasn't angry, just matter of fact. I'm sorry. I was exploring. The library is private. He entered, crossing to a desk where a computer displayed complex schematics. Lyra should have left. Instead, she asked, "What happened today? When you kissed me?" Thorne's shoulders tensed. Static electricity. We both saw something. Children in a lab. Coincidence. That's not possible, and you know it. Lyra stepped closer. Have we met before? Because I felt. What you felt is irrelevant. Thorne turned, his expression guarded. Our arrangement is business. Nothing more. Business doesn't explain shared hallucinations. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then the mask returned. I have work to finish. Your bedroom has a separate entrance. The code is 1984. The grounds are monitored, so don't wander beyond the gardens without security. Am I a wife or a prisoner? A bitter smile touched his lips. Is there a difference? We both signed our freedom away. After he left, Lyra noticed a newspaper on the desk. The headline read, Blackwood Technologies frontrunner for $2 billion Pentagon AI contract. The pieces clicked into place. His sudden need for a respectable image. The rushed wedding. She was an investment, nothing more. Morning brought rain against the windows and a message from Mrs. Winters. Mr. Blackwood has gone to New York for meetings. He'll return tomorrow evening. Your schedule is on the tablet by your bed. The tablet displayed a week's worth of appointments, fittings with a stylist, sessions with an etiquette coach, briefings on Blackwood Technologies for conversational familiarity. Her life was being programmed without her input. The last entry made her stomach drop. Charity Gala. First public appearance as Mrs. Blackwood. 3 days. They were giving her 3 days to become someone else. That afternoon, as a stylist discussed appropriate attire for corporate wives, Lyra's head began to pound. Images flashed behind her eyes. The same laboratory from the shared vision, but more detailed now. A woman in a white coat adjusting equipment. A man with Thorne's eyes taking notes. Mrs. Blackwood? Are you all right? The stylist's voice seemed distant. I need air, Lyra managed, stumbling to the balcony. The ocean crashed against the cliffs below, wild and untamed. Unlike her life, which was now contained in contracts and schedules, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the boathouse. 3 p.m. Come alone. No signature. The message disappeared seconds after she read it. Curiosity warred with caution. This could be a trap, some media person looking for gossip about the mysterious Mrs. Blackwood. Or worse, someone who knew about their arrangement. Still, anything was better than another hour discussing appropriate hemlines. The boathouse sat at the edge of the property, partially hidden by pine trees. Lyra checked her watch. 3:05. No one was visible. She started to turn back when a voice stopped her. You look exactly like your mother. An elderly man emerged from the shadows, his weathered face kind but cautious. Who are you? Lyra asked. Dr. Marshall Hayes. I worked with your parents. He glanced nervously around. Your real parents, not the Merrills. Lyra froze. My birth parents died when I was 8. That's what they wanted you to believe. He handed her a worn photo. This was taken at Blackwood Research Facility, 1999. The image showed 4 scientists in a laboratory, the same laboratory from her vision. And there, standing together, were younger versions of the man and woman from her recurring dreams. Those are my birth parents, Elizabeth and James Nightingale. Dr. Hayes pointed to the other couple. And those are Thomas and Margaret Blackwood, Thorne's parents. They were partners in a classified research project, Hayes continued. Project Mirror. They were studying neural connection. Why are you telling me this now? Hayes looked at her with sad eyes. Because when you and Thorne kissed at City Hall, it triggered something that's been dormant for 15 years. Something they put in your minds. How do you know about the kiss? Because I've been waiting for it to happen. His expression grew urgent. Listen carefully. There are people who will kill to keep this secret. Pierce is one of them. Sterling Pierce? My lawyer. He's not your lawyer. He engineered this whole situation. Your parents' debts, the marriage, all designed to bring you and Thorne together under controlled circumstances. Before Lyra could process this revelation, a security alarm blared across the property. Hayes tensed. They know I'm here. Take this. He pressed a small metal key into her palm. Storage Unit 237, Providence Central. Everything you need is there. Hayes disappeared into the trees as security guards rounded the corner. That night, alone in her suite, Lyra examined the key. Hayes had seemed genuinely afraid. But his story was impossible. Neural connections? Secret research? It sounded like science fiction. And yet, the shared vision was real. And now she had a key that might lead to answers. Her new husband was hiding something connected to her past, to her real parents. The contract she'd signed suddenly seemed like the least binding agreement in her complicated new life. Lyra woke gasping, the dream still vivid behind her eyelids. Children in white rooms. Electrodes. A burning sensation at the base of her skull. Her hand instinctively reached to touch the spot. A small, barely perceptible scar hidden beneath her hairline. She'd always believed it came from falling off a swing as a child. Now she wondered. Dawn broke over the Atlantic, painting the glass walls of her suite with golden light. Her 3rd day in the Blackwood estate, and it still felt like living in a beautiful museum where she couldn't touch anything. A notification chimed on her tablet. Mr. Blackwood returns this evening. Gala preparations begin at 2 p.m. Her fingers closed around the small key Dr. Hayes had given her. Providence was only a 40-minute drive. She could go to the storage unit and be back before her appointments. But how to leave without being noticed? Security monitored the grounds, and she doubted they'd let her take a car without reporting to Thorne. The answer came during breakfast when Mrs. Winters mentioned she was going to the farmer's market. I'd love to join you, Lyra said, surprising herself with how easily the lie came. I need some fresh air. Mrs. Winters seemed pleased. Of course, Mrs. Blackwood. We leave in 30 minutes. In Newport, she asked Mrs. Winters to drop her at a boutique. I'd like to find something special for tonight. A surprise for my husband. The older woman smiled knowingly. Take your time. I'll finish the shopping and meet you here in 2 hours. The moment the car disappeared, Lyra hailed a taxi to the Providence train station where she rented a car using her new black credit card, the one Pierce had given her for incidentals. Providence Central Storage occupied a nondescript building downtown. Unit 237 was on the 2nd floor. The key fit perfectly. Inside, a single metal filing cabinet stood against the wall. The first drawer contained personnel files. Project Mirror, Blackwood Research Facility, 1997 to 2003. The names matched those from Hayes' photo. Blackwood, Thomas. Blackwood, Margaret. Nightingale, James. Nightingale, Elizabeth. The second drawer held medical files labeled by subject numbers rather than names. One folder was marked Subject 7L with her birthdate. Another read Subject 12T with a date she recognized as Thorne's birthday. The third drawer was locked. The files revealed fragments of a classified research project. Phrases like neural synchronization and telepathic amplification appeared frequently. Photos showed laboratory settings identical to her dreams and to the vision she'd shared with Thorne. One document made her blood run cold. Subjects 7L and 12T demonstrate unprecedented success in tests. Neural pathways have been successfully integrated across distinct brain architecture. Physical proximity increases bandwidth of connection. They've been experimenting on children, on her and Thorne. She took photos of everything with her phone, then carefully replaced the files. She would need time to process what she'd found. The drive back to Newport was a blur. She arrived at the boutique just as Mrs. Winters pulled up, a perfect alibi established. Back at the estate, stylists transformed her for the gala. Hair, makeup, designer gown. She moved through it mechanically, her mind racing with questions. Why connect two children's minds? What were they hoping to achieve? And why orchestrate this false marriage 15 years later? You look distracted, said Simone Chun, appearing in the doorway as the makeup artist finished. The PR executive's critical gaze swept over Lyra. Tonight is crucial. The Pentagon committee chairman will be there, along with key investors. I know my role, Lyra replied, meeting Simone's eyes in the mirror. Do you? Because your husband has worked 15 years for this contract. I won't let anything jeopardize it. The threat wasn't subtle. We have the same goal, Miss Chun. A successful evening. Simone's phone buzzed. Thorne's helicopter just landed. He'll meet you downstairs in 20 minutes. She paused at the door. One more thing. Vivian Hawthorne will be attending tonight. Thorne's ex-fiancée? Yes. The media will be watching your interaction. Handle it gracefully. After Simone left, Lyra studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror was a stranger, draped in midnight blue silk, diamonds at her throat, hair swept into an elegant updo that hid the small scar at her nape. A perfect corporate trophy wife. Except she wasn't. She was subject 7L, somehow neurologically connected to the man she'd fraudulently married. Thorne waited at the base of the grand staircase, impeccable in a tuxedo. His eyes widened slightly as she descended, then quickly returned to their usual guarded expression. You look appropriate, he said, offering his arm. High praise, she replied dryly. In the limousine, silence stretched between them. Finally, Lyra broke it. Tell me about Vivian. Thorne's jaw tightened. That's not part of our arrangement. She'll be there tonight. I should know what happened. He stared out the window for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was distant. We were engaged for 11 months. The wedding was set for June. 3 weeks before, she sold proprietary information about our quantum encryption project to a competitor. His fingers drummed once on his knee, the only sign of emotion. The damage was contained, but it cost us $1 billion contract with the NSA. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a business lesson. He turned to her, eyes cold. Everyone has a price. Remember that tonight. The Providence Art Museum had been transformed for the gala. Hundreds of guests in formal were mingled beneath crystal chandeliers. Lyra recognized faces from television and magazines, tech moguls, politicians, celebrities. Thorne kept her close, his hand at the small of her back as he made introductions. She smiled and nodded, playing her part while scanning the crowd for Sterling Pierce. Had he orchestrated this entire charade because of Project Mirror? Senator Jenkins, may I introduce my wife, Lyra. The senator, chairman of the Pentagon Appropriations Committee, kissed her hand. Blackwood, you've been holding out on us. Where have you been hiding this lovely creature? Boston, Thorne said smoothly. We wanted privacy until things were official. Wise choice. Jenkins winked. Marriage suits you. Gives investors confidence, knowing a man has roots. As the men discussed the contract, Lyra felt eyes on her. Across the room stood a striking blonde in a crimson gown, watching with open hostility. Vivian Hawthorne. If you'll excuse me, Lyra murmured, slipping away toward the ladies' room. She was washing her hands when the door opened and Vivian entered. So you're the replacement. Vivian's voice was honey-coated steel. Quite the whirlwind romance, according to the press release. Lyra dried her hands. Vivian, right? Thorne's mentioned you. I'm sure he has. She moved closer, the scent of expensive perfume overwhelming. Let me save you some time. Whatever he's paying you, it's not worth it. I don't know what you mean. Vivian laughed. Please. Thorne doesn't do love. He collects assets. I was the socialite with family connections. You're the wholesome nurse who'll charm old men with military budgets. Next year, he'll trade up again. You sound bitter. I sound experienced. Vivian's smile was razor-sharp. A word of advice, get everything in writing. Thorne's promises vanish the moment you're no longer useful. Lyra should have let it go. But the day's discoveries had left her raw. Like when you sold his company's secrets? Vivian's smile faltered. Is that what he told you? She recovered quickly. You should ask him about the Nightingale Protocol. Ask him what really happened in that fire 15 years ago. Before Lyra could respond, the door opened. Simone Chen glared at them both. There you are. Thorne is looking for you, Lyra. The chairman is ready to make his announcement. Back in the ballroom, Thorne took her arm possessively. Stay away from Vivian. She found me, Lyra whispered back. What's the Nightingale protocol? Thorne's fingers tightened painfully on her arm. Where did you hear that? Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Jenkins's voice boomed through the speakers, saving her from answering. I'm pleased to announce that the Pentagon's Advanced Research Committee has selected Blackwood Technologies for our new Defense Intelligence Initiative, a $2 billion investment in America's future security. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed as Thorne stepped forward to shake Jenkins's hand. The perfect photo opportunity, successful businessman, beautiful wife, lucrative government contract. Kiss her, someone shouted. Kiss your bride. The crowd took up the chant. Thorne turned to her, his expression unreadable. He leaned in, his lips barely brushing hers, clearly determined to avoid a repeat of the City Hall incident. Too late. Even that slight contact sent a jolt through them both. This time, the vision was clearer. Children running down a sterile hallway, alarms blaring, smoke filling the corridor. Lyra pulled back, disoriented. Thorne steadied her with a hand at her waist, but his eyes blazed with angry questions. Later, in the limousine, he rounded on her. What was that? What are you doing to me? I'm not doing anything, she shot back. This is happening to both of us. It's impossible. Is it? What about Project Mirror? What about subjects 7L and 12T? Thorne went very still. How do you know those designations? The same way I know about the Nightingale Protocol. I've been doing my research. Half truth, half bluff. But it worked. Something like fear flashed across his face. You're out of your depth, he said quietly. Then help me understand. What did they do to us, Thorne? Why can we see each other's memories? He looked away. They're not memories. They can't be. I never. He stopped, his hand unconsciously moving to the base of his skull, exactly where her own scar was located. The limousine pulled through the gates of the estate. Thorne was out before it fully stopped. This conversation is over, he called over his shoulder. Stay away from me. Lyra watched him disappear into the house, his perfect poise finally shattered. She'd struck a nerve, or perhaps, more accurately, a neural connection. In her suite, she spread the photographs from the storage unit files across the bed. Scientific jargon she barely understood. Experiment logs. Brain scans labeled with their subject numbers. One photo caught her attention, a group shot of the research team from 2002. 8 scientists posed in a laboratory, including the Blackwoods and the Nightingales. In the background stood a younger Sterling Pierce, not as a lawyer, but wearing a lab coat, part of the research team. And beside him, taking notes, was a woman Lyra recognized instantly from the gala. Vivian Hawthorne's mother. The pieces were starting to align, forming a pattern more complex and dangerous than a simple business arrangement. Lyra and Thorne weren't strangers thrust together by circumstance. They had been deliberately reunited by people who knew exactly what would happen when they touched. Sleep eluded Lyra. The files from the storage unit had opened a Pandora's box of questions. By 3 a.m., she gave up trying to rest and slipped out of her suite. The Blackwood estate was different at night. Shadows stretched across marble floors, and the endless glass walls reflected the moonlight like still water. She wandered aimlessly until she found herself in the West Wing, a part of the house she hadn't explored. Unlike the pristine modern design of the main house, this section felt older, preserved from an earlier structure. The hallway ended at a heavy wooden door with an electronic keypad. Without thinking, Lyra punched in a code, 7L12T. The mechanism clicked open. She froze, hand on the door. How had she known that? The room beyond was a home office, but unlike Thorne's sterile workspaces, this one was cluttered with personal touches. Family photos lined the walls, a younger Thorne with his parents. Awards and diplomas. Papers stacked in organized chaos. Thomas Blackwood's office, preserved exactly as he'd left it. Lyra moved to the desk, drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain. The top drawer was unlocked. Inside lay a leather-bound journal with the Blackwood family crest embossed on the cover. What are you doing in here? She whirled around. Thorne stood in the doorway, barefoot and disheveled in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Despite the late hour, his eyes were alert, suspicious. How did you get in? That door requires a code. I don't know, she admitted. I just knew it. His expression hardened, but something else flickered behind his eyes. Fear? Recognition? You need to leave. Not until you tell me the truth. She held up the journal. What were our parents working on? Why can we see each other's memories? They're not memories, he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Then what are they? Why did your parents connect our minds? Why did mine die in that fire? You think I know? Anger flashed across his face. I was 10 years old when it happened. One day they were there, the next they were gone. All I remember is smoke and sirens. And running down a hallway with a little girl? Lyra pressed. That was me, wasn't it? We were there together. Thorne moved past her to pour himself a drink from a crystal decanter. He downed it in one swallow. I have these gaps, he said finally. Periods from my childhood I can't remember. The doctors called it trauma response from the fire. Or maybe someone deliberately removed those memories. He laughed without humor. Now you sound paranoid. Do I? Lyra opened the journal to a dog-eared page. Listen to this. The neural link between subjects 7L and 12T has exceeded expectations. The children can now share sensory input across distances of up to 1 mile. Margaret believes with further refinement, they might achieve full telepathic communication. Thorne snatched the journal from her hands. Where did you find this? In the drawer. But there's more in Providence. Files, research notes. Stop. He raised a hand. I don't want to know. How can you not want to know? They experimented on us, Thorne. They connected our brains somehow. And then they died. His voice was flat. Whatever they were doing died with them. Did it? Lyra stepped closer. Then explain what happens when we touch. Explain how I knew the access code to this office. Explain why Sterling Pierce orchestrated our marriage. Thorne's eyes narrowed. What does Pierce have to do with this? He was part of the research team. So was Vivian's mother. She pulled out her phone, showing him the photograph. They're still playing whatever game our parents started. He studied the photo, his composure cracking. For a moment, he looked young and lost. The boy from her visions, not the billionaire with walls of glass and steel. If you're right, he said slowly, then nothing in my life has been my own. My company, my success, was it all just part of their plan? I don't know, but I want answers as much as you do. Their eyes met, and for the first time, there was no hostility between them. Just shared confusion and a strange recognition that went beyond their brief acquaintance. The house alarm shattered the moment. Security breach, Sector 7, announced an automated voice. Security breach, Sector 7. Thorne moved instantly, pressing his palm to a hidden panel in the wall. A screen revealed security camera feeds. Someone's trying to access my private lab. He pulled a gun from another hidden compartment. Stay here and lock the door. I'm coming with you. This isn't a debate. Whoever's down there might have answers we both need. Thorne hesitated, then nodded curtly. Stay behind me. They moved silently through the darkened house, down a service staircase Lyra hadn't known existed. At the bottom, a long concrete corridor led to another keypad-secured door. My research facility, Thorne explained in a whisper. Only 3 people have access. Through the security feed on his phone, they could see 2 figures in the lab, systematically photographing documents and downloading data from the computers. I recognize them, Lyra whispered. They work for Sterling. Thorne's jaw tightened. He typed a code into the keypad, but instead of opening the door, it triggered emergency lights throughout the corridor. I've sealed them in, he explained. Security will be here in 3 minutes. But when the guards arrived, the intruders were gone, a ventilation grate hanging open on the far wall. Inside the lab, Thorne assessed the damage. They were after my quantum computing research. The same technology Vivian tried to steal. Or maybe they were after this. Lyra pointed to a drawer left slightly open. The label read Project Legacy. Thorne pulled it open. Inside was a single file folder containing brain scans, recent ones, dated within the past month. The names on the scans, Thorne Blackwood and Lyra Nightingale. You've been studying us, Lyra whispered, betrayal sharp in her chest. You knew all along. No. Thorne looked genuinely shocked. I've never seen these before. Someone's been using my lab. Before she could respond, his security tablet chimed with a message. His face darkened as he read it. The intruders disabled the cameras for exactly 9 minutes. Enough time to get what they wanted and escape. He looked up at her, suspicion returning. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? The same night you start asking questions about Project Mirror. You think I'm involved? I'm a victim in this, just like you. Are you? You show up when I need a wife for public appearances. You know codes you shouldn't know. You lead me to my father's journal the same night my lab is breached. That's insane. Is it? Or have you been Sterling's puppet all along? He advanced on her, anger radiating from him in waves. Was this the plan? Distract me with talk of neural links while your accomplices steal my research. If I wanted your research, why would I point out the file they were after? Lyra stood her ground. Think, Thorn. We're being manipulated, both of us. Something shifted in his expression, doubt warring with suspicion. Sir, a security guard interrupted from the doorway. We found this outside the perimeter fence. He held up a woman's high-heeled shoe. Looks like one of the intruders lost it while escaping. Thorn took the shoe, examining the designer label. Vivian, he said grimly. This is her brand. She was at the gala tonight, Lyra reminded him. She could have been gathering intel, waiting for us to leave the house. Or working with Pierce. Thorn set the shoe down. We need to determine what they took. He moved to a computer terminal, fingers flying over the keyboard. Lyra watched the symbols and code flash across the screen, incomprehensible to her. The quantum encryption algorithms are intact, he muttered. But they access the neural mapping program. Neural mapping? It's a medical imaging technology we're developing. Uses quantum computing to create three-dimensional models of neural pathways. His eyes narrowed. They copied the files on mirror neurons and empathic response patterns. The pieces clicked together in Lyra's mind. They're trying to recreate Project Mirror. Your parents' research, they're continuing it. Impossible. That research died 15 years ago. Did it? Or did Pierce and the others just take it underground? She gestured to the brain scans. Look at the dates, Thorn. Someone's been monitoring us for months. The marriage, the contract, it was all designed to bring us together again. Thorn stared at the scans, then at Lyra. The anger drained from him, replaced by something more complex. Come with me, he said abruptly. There's something you need to see. He led her deeper into the lab, through another security door, into a small room dominated by an MRI-like machine. This is a prototype neural scanner, he explained. More advanced than anything on the market. It can visualize neural activity in real time. You want to scan my brain? Lyra asked skeptically. I want to scan our connection. He met her eyes directly. If Pierce manipulated us into this marriage to reactivate some dormant neural link, we need to know what we're dealing with. And if he's monitoring your equipment? This machine isn't networked. Whatever we discover stays between us. He hesitated. I need to know if my life is my own, Lyra. Don't you? She did. More than anything. How does it work? We lie in the scanner, side by side. It maps our brain activity while we... He cleared his throat. While we touch. The implication hung between them. Physical contact triggered the visions. Prolonged contact might reveal the full extent of their connection. Will it hurt? No. But it might show us things we're not prepared to see. They positioned themselves in the scanner, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, staring up at the gleaming machinery above them. Ready? Thorn asked. No, Lyra admitted. But do it anyway. He reached over and took her hand. The connection was immediate, stronger than before. Images flashed rapidly. The laboratory, the children, the fire. But this time, they didn't stop. Years of forgotten memories cascaded through their joined consciousness. Playing chess in a white room while scientists observed. Learning to sense each other's emotions across increasingly greater distances. Secret conversations in the dark after the adults thought they were asleep. A growing fear as the tests became more invasive. The fire, not an accident, but deliberate. Lyra's parents rushing them through smoke-filled corridors. Separation. Pain. The searing agony of a neural link severed too quickly. Then darkness. Above them, the scanner recorded everything, translating their shared neural activity into data, proof of the impossible. When it ended, they lay gasping, still holding hands, unwilling to break the connection that now felt strangely right. We knew each other, Thorn whispered. All those years ago. They made us forget, Lyra replied, tears streaming down her face. They cut the connection between us. Not completely. Thorn turned to face her. It was dormant, not destroyed. On the monitor beside them, their neural patterns danced in tandem. Two separate brains functioning in unprecedented synchrony. Pierce knew this would happen, Lyra said. He knew that if we were together again, the connection would reactivate. The question is why? Thorne sat up, helping her to a sitting position. What do they gain from linking us again? The answer hit them simultaneously, a shared realization through their renewed connection. The Pentagon contract, they said in unison. My quantum computing research. Thorne's voice grew urgent. Combined with a working neural interface, weaponized telepathy, Lyra finished. Soldiers linked on the battlefield. Spies who can communicate without detection. That's what they're after. Not just the technology, but us, the proof of concept. He stood, pulling her up with him. We need to leave. Now. This house isn't safe. Where can we go that Pierce won't find us? Thorne's expression hardened with determination. There's one place. A cabin in the Vermont woods. Off-grid. Not even Simone knows about it. We'll need evidence, Lyra said. Those files in Providence, your father's journal. A distant explosion cut her off, shaking the foundations of the house. That came from the East Wing, Thorne said, already moving. You're sweet. They ran through the corridors, Thorne's security team converging from all directions. Smoke poured from the doorway of Lyra's rooms. Inside, flames engulfed the bed where she'd laid out the photographs of the Project Mirror files. They're destroying the evidence, Lyra coughed through the smoke. Thorne pulled her back as part of the ceiling collapsed. They're trying to destroy us. Dawn broke over the Green Mountains as Thorne's Range Rover wound through the forested roads of Vermont. They had fled Newport at 3 a.m., taking only essentials, Thorne's father's journal, the brain scans, and whatever clothes they could grab before the fire spread. Are we being followed? Lyra asked, scanning the empty road behind them. Unlikely. We switched vehicles twice, and I disabled all the GPS trackers. Thorne's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. But we can't be too careful. Pierce has resources. They hadn't contacted the police. Who could they trust when Sterling Pierce had spent 15 years orchestrating their reunion? The fire would be reported as an electrical malfunction. The official story would protect the conspirators. The cabin appeared suddenly, a modern structure of wood and stone nestled against the mountainside, almost invisible among the pines. My grandfather built this place, Thorne explained as he unlocked the door. Before the family fortune, before Blackwood Technologies. Pierce doesn't know it exists. Inside was surprisingly comfortable, a great room with a stone fireplace, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a small study. Solar panels and a generator provided power. A satellite dish offered limited connectivity. We should be safe here, Thorne said, securing the doors. At least long enough to figure out our next move. They spent the morning reviewing everything they'd salvaged. The journal provided glimpses into Project Mirror, Thomas Blackwood's ambitious attempt to create a neural interface between human minds. Listen to this entry, Lyra said, reading from the journal. The children's connection has evolved beyond our predictions. They no longer require physical contact to sense each other's emotional states. Margaret believes they're developing a form of true telepathy. If we're right, this could revolutionize human communication. Thorne studied the brain scans they'd taken from his lab. The neural pathways they created are still intact, dormant until we made physical contact again. But why us? Why 2 children? Developing brains are more adaptable. Thorne pointed to a passage in the journal. My father theorized that prepubescent neural architecture was ideal for forming new pathways. Adult brains were too rigid. They used their own children as lab rats, Lyra said bitterly. They thought they were advancing human evolution. Thorne's tone was neutral, but through their strengthening connection, Lyra felt his conflicted emotions. Pride in his father's genius. Anger at the ethical violations. Confusion about his own identity. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Storage unit compromised. Destroy everything. Trust no one. H. Hayes, the elderly scientist who'd approached her at the boathouse. We need to go public, Lyra decided. Expose Project Mirror, the experiments, everything. And then what? Thorne's voice was sharp. Best case scenario, we become government lab rats. Worst case, we're eliminated to protect national security interests. So we do nothing? Let Pierce weaponize your technology and our connection. No, we need leverage. He moved to the satellite phone. I'm calling the one person who might help us. Who? Dr. Maya Rodriguez. She runs Blackwood's neuroscience division. If anyone can understand what was done to us, it's her. Lyra felt a spike of suspicion. Can you trust her? I don't know. But she's brilliant, and she has no connection to the original project. Rodriguez agreed to meet them halfway, at a research facility in Albany owned by a colleague. They would bring their evidence. She would bring equipment to properly analyze their neural connection. The drive to Albany was tense. Every passing car became a potential threat. Every stop for gas an opportunity for exposure. If something happens to me, Thorne said as they crossed the New York state line, there's a server in Zurich with an encrypted file. Password is Cherokee 1989. It contains everything you'll need to disappear. New identity, accounts, properties. Nothing's going to happen to you, Lyra insisted. He glanced at her. We both know that's not true. They've already tried to kill us once. Through their strengthening connection, she felt his genuine concern for her safety, surprising from a man who'd treated her as a business transaction just days earlier. The research facility was a nondescript building in a commercial park. Dr. Rodriguez met them at a side entrance, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s with calculating eyes. This way, she said, leading them to a laboratory outfitted with advanced neuroimaging equipment. I've reviewed the scans you sent. Frankly, I wouldn't have believed it without seeing the data. Can you determine exactly what was done to us? Lyra asked. I'll try. The procedure will take several hours. You'll both need to be monitored simultaneously. While Rodriguez prepared the equipment, Thorne took Lyra aside. I'll go first, he said quietly. If anything seems wrong, we do this together, she interrupted. That's the whole point, isn't it? Our connection. He studied her face, then nodded once. For the next 4 hours, they underwent a battery of tests, separated at first, then together. EEGs, fMRIs, specialized quantum resonance scans developed by Blackwood Technologies. Rodriguez worked methodically, her expression growing increasingly amazed. It's remarkable, she said finally, displaying their neural patterns on a large screen. The interface between your minds isn't just theoretical, it's physically evident. Your brains have developed complementary neural architectures. Can you reverse it? Thorne asked. Rodriguez looked startled. Reverse it? That would be like performing radical brain surgery with a sledgehammer. The connection is fundamental to your neural structure now. So we're stuck like this, Lyra said, oddly relieved. The thought of losing the connection had become unexpectedly painful. Not stuck. Enhanced. Rodriguez's eyes gleamed with scientific excitement. You're experiencing the next stage of human communication. Direct mind-to-mind contact. And that's why Pierce wants to control us, Thorne concluded. Military applications, among others. Rodriguez brought up a new display showing a simulation of networked minds. Imagine intelligence agents who can share information instantly across continents. Surgeons operating in perfect synchrony. The applications are endless. And profoundly dangerous in the wrong hands, Thorne said. Rodriguez's expression turned serious. Which brings us to why I agreed to meet you. There's something you should see. She pulled up a classified document on her tablet. A Pentagon request for proposals on a project codenamed Gemini Protocol. This circulated among defense contractors 6 months ago, she explained. Blackwood Technologies competed for this contract, but so did Pierce Dynamics. Pierce has his own company, Lyra asked. Founded 3 years ago, focusing on neural interface technology. They've made remarkable progress for such a new entity. Thorne scanned the document, his expression darkening. They're explicitly requesting technology for linking human operators across distances. Perfect for what Pierce is developing. Using our connection as the template, Lyra added. That's why he brought us together. Rodriguez nodded. I suspect Pierce has been monitoring your neural patterns since you reconnected, gathering data for his prototype. How? Thorne demanded. My house is swept for surveillance equipment daily. Rodriguez hesitated. There may be other methods. Theoretically, if someone had access to your medical records, they could implant nanoreceivers during routine procedures. Like my annual physical, Thorne said grimly. Performed by doctors chosen by my executive team, which includes people Pierce has known for years. A chill ran through Lyra. We're walking data points. We need to go public, Thorne decided. Release everything. The original project files, our scans, the Pentagon contract specifications. That would destroy your company, Rodriguez warned. The stock would crash overnight. Everything you've built was built on a lie. His voice was steady. If Pierce has been manipulating my entire career to reach this point, none of it was real anyway. The pain in those words struck Lyra deeply. Through their connection, she felt the fundamental crisis beneath his composed exterior, a man questioning if his life's work had ever truly been his own. There's another option, Rodriguez said. Confront Pierce directly. Get him to incriminate himself. How? Lyra asked. He believes he's winning. Use that. Arrange a meeting where he thinks you're willing to cooperate. Record everything. The plan took shape quickly. Thorne would contact Pierce, claiming to have discovered their connection and seeing its potential. He would offer a partnership, Blackwood's quantum technology combined with Pierce's neural interface research. A meeting would be arranged at Blackwood Technologies' headquarters in Boston, where everything could be secretly recorded. Rodriguez left to prepare specialized recording equipment that could bypass conventional sweeps. Alone in the lab, Thorne and Lyra faced each other across a table of brain scans that mapped their extraordinary connection. This is dangerous, Lyra said. If Pierce suspects a trap, he won't. His ego won't allow it. Thorne's confidence was absolute. He spent 15 years orchestrating this. He'll want to gloat. And Vivian? Where does she fit in? Probably the same place her mother did. Scientific partner with benefits. His voice was cold. Our engagement was just another manipulation, positioning Pierce's ally close to me. Lyra felt his pain sharpen through their connection. Another betrayal added to the growing list. There's something else we should discuss, she said carefully. This connection between us, it's getting stronger. I know. His eyes met hers. I can feel what you're feeling. Sometimes I know what you're thinking before you say it. And after we expose Pierce, what happens to us? The question hung between them, simultaneously spoken and unspoken through their unique bond. Their marriage was a fraud, but their connection was undeniably real. What would become of them once this crisis passed? Before Thorne could answer, his phone rang, an unknown number. He put it on speaker. Mr. Blackwood. Sterling Pierce's smooth voice filled the laboratory. I understand you've been trying to reach me. Thorne tensed. How did you get this number? The same way I know you're currently in Albany with Dr. Rodriguez and your charming wife. Pierce's tone was conversational, as if discussing the weather. I know everything, Thorne. I always have. Through their connection, Lyra felt Thorne's spike of fear, quickly controlled. What do you want, Sterling? To complete what our parents started. To realize the true potential of Project Mirror. A pause. You and Lyra are remarkable specimens. The neural integration is beyond anything we predicted. So you arranged our marriage to study us, Thorne said flatly. Was the Pentagon contract part of the plan too? Pierce laughed. The contract is real enough. The military is very interested in telepathically linked operatives. Your company provided the perfect cover for continuing our research. Our research? You were just a lab assistant. Is that what you think? Pierce's voice hardened. Your father stole my research. The neural mapping algorithm was mine. He took credit for 15 years of my work. Lyra and Thorne exchanged glances. This wasn't just about scientific advancement or military contracts. This was personal. If you want recognition, go public, Thorne challenged. Publish your research. Too late for that. But I'm not unreasonable. I'm offering you a partnership. Your quantum computing, my neural interface technology, and your connection with Lyra as proof of concept. And if we refuse? Pierce's voice turned silky. Then I'll release the evidence that you and your wife have been engaged in unauthorized human experimentation. The same technology that makes your neural connection possible has been implanted in unwitting Blackwood employees for years. Imagine the lawsuits. The criminal charges. That's a lie, Thorne growled. Is it? Check your company's executive physical program. Ask Dr. Chun about the wellness implants she's been authorizing. Ask yourself why you never questioned it. The blood drained from Thorne's face as realization dawned. Simone Chun, his trusted PR executive for 12 years, was part of Pierce's conspiracy. You have 24 hours to decide, Pierce continued. Come to Pierce Dynamics tomorrow at noon. Bring Lyra and all your research. If you try to go public before then, I'll release everything, including the evidence that the fire that killed your parents was no accident. The call ended, leaving them in stunned silence. He's bluffing, Lyra said, but without conviction. Maybe. Thorne looked sick. But what if he's not? What if my company has been experimenting on people without my knowledge? We need to find out. Lyra took his hand, the familiar electrical current flowing between them, strengthening their resolve. And we need a new plan. As they left the laboratory, neither noticed the small drone hovering outside the window, its camera following their every move. Nor did they see Dr. Rodriguez making a call from her car. They took the bait, she said quietly. They'll be at Pierce Dynamics tomorrow at noon. Excellent, replied a woman's voice, Vivian Hawthorne. Make sure they bring everything. We need those brain scans. And after, Vivian laughed softly. Well, accidents happen, don't they? Especially to people who know too much. Lyra's small Providence apartment felt like a sanctuary after days of chaos. They'd chosen it as their temporary hideout, an address unconnected to either of them. While Thorne worked feverishly on his laptop, she stared at the rain streaking down the windows, feeling the weight of tomorrow's confrontation. Pierce was lying about the implants, Thorne announced, breaking the silence. I've accessed the executive medical records. There's nothing unusual. One lie among many, Lyra replied. But the threat remains. Their plan had evolved since Pierce's call. Instead of a direct confrontation, they would gather evidence first. Thorne had spent hours hacking into Pierce Dynamics systems, uncovering fragments of Project Mirror's resurrection. Look at this, he said, turning the screen toward her. Pierce has been developing a neural transmitter, military grade. It's designed to link multiple operators in a network, using our connection as the template. Can he make it work without us? Eventually, maybe. But we're his shortcut, living proof the technology functions. Thorne ran a hand through his disheveled hair. He needs our brain scans, our genetic material, and the quantum algorithms I've developed. Lyra sat beside him, their shoulders touching. The now familiar current flowed between them, but it no longer startled her. It felt natural, right? What if we corrupted the data? She suggested. Give him what he wants, but make it useless. Thorne's eyes lit up. Pierce knows technology, but not quantum computing. If I introduced subtle errors into the algorithmic structure, he wouldn't know until it was too late. They worked through the night, preparing doctored files and falsified research data. Through their strengthening connection, they functioned with unprecedented efficiency, Lyra anticipating Thorne's needs before he expressed them, Thorne completing her thoughts as they strategized. Around midnight, Lyra felt a strange prickling at the base of her skull. Someone's watching us. Thorne immediately closed the laptop. Within seconds, there was a soft knock at the door. They exchanged glances, communicating silently through their link. Thorne reached for his gun while Lyra approached the door cautiously. Who is it? Dr. Hayes, came the muffled reply. Quickly, please. She opened the door to find the elderly scientist looking haggard and frightened. They're on to you, he said without preamble. Rodriguez is working with Pierce. The meeting tomorrow is a trap. He handed Thorne a flash drive. Your father's complete research. The parts Pierce doesn't know about. Why are you helping us? Lyra asked. Hayes looked away. Guilt. I helped design the neural interface that connected you. I didn't know they'd test it on children. He met their eyes. Your parents tried to shut it down when they discovered Pierce's military applications. That's why they died. The truth hit them both simultaneously. Pierce killed our parents, Thorne said flatly. Hayes nodded. He arranged the lab fire to eliminate opposition and gain control of the research. Only your parents had created a failsafe. They severed your connection and hid you both before they died. Then why bring us back together now? Lyra asked. Pierce discovered Thorne's quantum computing could enhance the neural link exponentially. He's been working toward this moment for 15 years. Hayes glanced nervously at his watch. I need to go. They'll be looking for me. Tomorrow, don't go to Pierce Dynamics. Instead, a soft whine cut through the air. Hayes slumped forward, a dart protruding from his neck. Through the window, Lyra glimpsed a figure on the rooftop across the street. Sniper. Thorne pulled her down as another dart shattered the window. He dragged Hayes inside, checking for a pulse. He's alive. Tranquilizer, not poison. They fled through the back exit, taking only the essentials, the flash drive, their doctored research, and Hayes' unconscious body. As they loaded him into Thorne's car, Lyra felt a sharp burn in her shoulder. Thorne, she gasped, reaching for the dart embedded in her flesh. The world tilted sideways as the sedative took hold. The last thing she saw was Thorne's face, contorted with fear and rage as he lunged to catch her. Then darkness. Lyra woke to the steady beep of medical equipment. Her vision cleared slowly, revealing stark white walls and the silhouette of sophisticated machinery. Not a hospital. Something more advanced, more ominous. "Welcome back, Mrs. Blackwood." Sterling Pierce stepped into view, immaculate in a charcoal suit. "Apologies for the dramatic extraction, but you left us little choice." She tried to move, discovering restraints on her wrists and ankles. Electrodes attached to her temples connected to a device monitoring her neural activity. "Where's Thorne?" Her voice was hoarse, her mouth dry. "Nearby, experiencing our hospitality as well." Pierce checked the monitors. "Remarkable. Even sedated and separated, your neural patterns remain synchronized." The room's door slid open. Vivian entered, followed by Dr. Rodriguez. "Is she stable?" Vivian asked, clinical and detached. "Completely." Rodriguez adjusted something on the monitors. "We can begin the procedure whenever you're ready." Pierce smiled at Lyra's evident fear. "Don't worry. We're not going to harm you, not permanently. We simply need to map the neural pathways created by your connection to Thorne." "And then what?" Lyra forced strength into her voice. "Keep us as lab rats." "Initially, yes. Until we've replicated the technology." Pierce checked his watch. "The Pentagon representatives arrive in 3 hours. By then, we'll have a working prototype of our neural interface." "Using us as the template," Lyra concluded. "Precisely. Once we demonstrate its effectiveness, the military contract is assured." He patted her arm condescendingly. "Your contribution to national security will be significant, if anonymous." Through the fog of sedatives, Lyra reached out mentally, seeking Thorne. Their connection had strengthened daily, perhaps strong enough to transcend physical separation. "Thorne?" She projected the thought, focusing on the neural link between them. "Nothing." Pierce noticed her concentration. "Trying to contact your husband? Admirable, but futile. The isolation chambers are specifically designed to dampen neural transmissions." "You can't keep us here forever," Lyra said. "People will look for us." Vivian laughed. "Who?" "Your marriage was a sham, orchestrated by Sterling. Your house conveniently burned down. As far as the world knows, you and Thorne have taken an extended honeymoon after your tragic loss." As they spoke, Lyra worked against her restraints, feeling a slight give in the left wrist strap. If she could just... A searing pain shot through her skull, so intense that she screamed. Simultaneously, alarms blared throughout the facility. "What's happening?" Pierce demanded. Rodriguez rushed to the monitors. "Her neural activity is spiking. It's impossible. She's breaking through the dampers." "Lyra." Thorne's voice filled her mind. "They're keeping us at Pierce Dynamics. I've disabled the security on your floor. Get out now." The pain subsided as quickly as it had come. Lyra gasped for breath, feigning weakness while continuing to work at her restraint. "Recalibrate the dampers," Pierce ordered, "and double the security on Blackwood's chamber." As Rodriguez adjusted the equipment, Lyra felt the restraint on her left wrist give way. She kept her arm still, waiting for her moment. "It's stabilizing," Rodriguez reported. "But I've never seen anything like this. Their connection is evolving, adapting to our countermeasures." "Accelerate the procedure," Pierce decided. "We can't risk waiting." As they prepared the equipment, the lights suddenly went out. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing the room in red. Through their connection, Lyra felt Thorne's urgency. "Now, Lyra." In one fluid motion, she freed her left arm, ripped off the electrodes, and struck Rodriguez with a metal tray of medical instruments. Pierce lunged for the alarm, but Lyra was faster, fueled by Thorne's strength flowing through their connection. The fight was brief and brutal. When it ended, Pierce and Rodriguez lay unconscious, and Vivian was trapped behind an equipment rack Lyra had upended. She freed herself completely, then ran into the corridor. Security personnel lay unconscious. Thorne's work. Following their connection like a beacon, she navigated the unfamiliar facility until she found him fighting 2 guards outside a server room. Moving in perfect synchronicity, they subdued the guards together. "The servers," Thorne gasped, bleeding from a cut above his eye. "We need to destroy their research before the Pentagon arrives." Inside the server room, they worked rapidly, Thorne hacking the systems while Lyra stood guard. "Done," he announced, initiating a catastrophic data purge. "Let's get out of here." They fled through maintenance corridors, guided by building schematics Thorne had memorized during his captivity. As they reached the parking garage, an alarm sounded. Pierce had recovered. There. Lyra pointed to a security vehicle with keys in the ignition. As they sped away from Pierce Dynamics, sirens wailing behind them, Thorne reached for her hand. The familiar current flowed between them, but stronger now, tempered by shared danger and growing trust. The cliffs, Thorne said suddenly. We need to go to Newport. Lyra understood without explanation. The final confrontation awaited them at the place where everything had begun. Chapter 8. Synchronized Souls. The Blackwood estate stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, partially rebuilt after the fire. Security lights illuminated the perimeter, but the house itself remained dark, abandoned in the chaos of recent days. Pierce will come here, Thorne said as they approached cautiously. He knows we have Hayes' flash drive with the original research. He can't let that get out. What exactly is on it? Lyra asked. Everything. The complete project mirror files, including evidence that Pierce sabotaged the lab and killed our parents. Thorne's voice was tight. And something else, a failsafe protocol our fathers designed. They entered through the lab's emergency tunnel, emerging into the partially damaged main house. Thorne led her to his father's office, miraculously untouched by the fire. We don't have much time, he said, inserting the flash drive into a hidden computer terminal. The Nightingale protocol isn't what Pierce thinks. The screen filled with schematics and code. Neural interface designs more advanced than anything they'd seen at Pierce Dynamics. Our fathers suspected Pierce's military ambitions, Thorne explained, typing rapidly. They built a backdoor into the neural interface, a way to permanently disable it if it ever fell into the wrong hands. Lyra studied the complex diagrams. How does it work? It requires 2 authorized neural signatures, ours. When activated, it generates a feedback pulse that destroys all neural transmitters built using the original template. Understanding dawned. It would render Pierce's technology useless. Exactly. But there's a catch. Thorne paused, looking directly at her. It requires full neural synchronization between us. No barriers, no holding back. The implication hung between them. Their connection had grown steadily, but they'd both maintained certain mental walls, protecting their deepest thoughts, their most private feelings. Complete vulnerability, Lyra whispered. Yes. He took her hand. Are you willing to try? Before she could answer, the security alarm blared. On the monitors, they watched Pierce's convoy arrive. 3 vehicles, at least 8 armed men. They're here, Thorne said grimly. We're out of time. He activated the Nightingale protocol while Lyra barricaded the office door. The computer prompted them to connect to the neural interface, 2 slim headsets with familiar technology. Once we start, we can't stop, Thorne warned. The synchronization must complete, or it fails. They donned the headsets as pounding began on the door. Through their link, Lyra felt Thorne's determination, his fear, and something deeper, something he'd kept carefully guarded. The program initiated. The first stage felt familiar, the same connection they'd experienced since their kiss at City Hall. But then it deepened, barriers dissolving between their minds. Memories flowed freely. Thorne's lonely childhood after the fire, his driven ambition to build something meaningful. Lyra's struggle through foster care, her determination to become a nurse and help others. Deeper still, their hopes, their fears, their most guarded secrets laid bare. The door splintered. Pierce entered with Vivian and 2 armed guards. Step away from the computer, he commanded. Now. Neither moved. The neural synchronization had reached its final stage, their minds completely merged. Through their joined consciousness, they accessed the Nightingale protocol controls. Pierce recognized the headsets. Stop them, he shouted. Too late. As the guards lunged forward, Thorne and Lyra simultaneously activated the failsafe. A pulse of energy surged through the neural network, invisible but powerful. Pierce clutched his head and screamed. So did Vivian. The neural implants they'd been secretly using to monitor and control their operatives backfired catastrophically. When it ended, Pierce lay unconscious. Vivian and the guards were disoriented, their neural enhancements permanently disabled. Slowly, Thorne and Lyra removed their headsets. Their connection remained, undiminished, no longer dependent on technology, but a permanent bridge between their minds. It's over, Thorne said, as security forces he'd summoned earlier stormed the house. 3 months later, they stood on the cliffs behind the rebuilt Blackwood estate, watching the sunset. Pierce and his conspirators faced federal charges for murder, corporate espionage, and illegal human experimentation. Blackwood Technologies had survived the scandal, now redirected toward medical applications of neural interface technology. Do you regret it? Lyra asked, her hand in his. Losing the Pentagon contract? The military applications? Not for a second. Thorne drew her closer. Some technology is too dangerous to weaponize. Their connection hummed between them, no longer strange or frightening, but a natural extension of themselves. What had begun as a business arrangement, a contract on paper, had evolved into something neither could have imagined. I never believed in soulmates, Thorne said quietly, but I believe in us. Their lips met as the last light faded from the sky. No visions this time, just the simple, profound reality of two minds perfectly attuned, two hearts beating as one, and a future neither would face alone.